everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics. Today, we're going to be mixing it up a little bit. I picked the brains of some of Off Panel's patrons. By the way, Off Panel now has a Patreon, so if you dig the show, think about backing on there for early access, exclusive content, and more. And thanks to all my patrons' feedback, we're going to be doing things a little different this week. We're going to be talking to a creator about their personal power rankings for all kinds of subjects, from favorite artists and biggest influences to varying topics specifically related to them. And just to keep you guys on your toes, I'm going to be mixing things like this into the show from time to time. So if you dig this, let me know. And without further ado, joining me today for this adventure in the world of podcasting is the artist and sometimes writer of all kinds of comics you probably like, particularly if they star Spider-Man. It's Ryan Stegman. Ryan.
Hey, how's it going?
What's happening, man?
Not much, just kicking back, ready to have you ask me a bunch of questions that I don't know if I'll know the answer to.
Well, the good news is they're not really questions. I mean, largely it's just us talking about things you like and things that are awesome in the world.
Absolutely, yeah.
So to start with, I'm going to be, basically for the format for you, I'm going to be throwing out subjects with like a certain amount of like people you need to bring up. You give me your answers and we'll talk about them. So first one, let's go back to the beginning. When you were growing up, like back in the day, favorite 5 artists when you were growing up?
The favorite 5. So when I was younger, I was obviously a huge Todd McFarlane fan. We're not going to be able to get through any of this probably without talking about McFarlane. And I then kind of progressed. Well, so he was on Spider-Man. Then I obviously loved Jim Lee. Couldn't escape those days. I still love Jim Lee.
So were you growing up in like the late 80s and early 90s?
Yeah, I was born in 81, so.
Okay.
So yeah, that was my wheelhouse right there. Let's see. Capullo then became a huge favorite when he was doing Spawn. I guess I was probably 14 or 15 at that point. I got really into manga around then because Wizard Magazine kept talking about the invasion of Japanese comics and everything, and so I got really into Atomo and Hiroki Samura. So those were, and Samura does Blade of the Immortal. So those 5 for me were extremely important at like a really important developmental time in my life.
Mm-hmm. I think those first 3 were definitely big ones for everyone. But the last 2, like I mean, obviously we talked about Akira last time. We talked about Tomo. I didn't Blade the Immortal. I didn't know that was a big thing for you.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I started going to the comic book store by my parents' house. And at first he wouldn't let me buy stuff like that, like anything that, he shouldn't have been letting me buy it. I was too young. And then, I would always go in there and I would hang out for a really long time and we would just talk about comics. And it was a pretty small shop, so it wasn't like it was bombarded with people. And eventually he just would let me buy whatever I wanted. And so I got, I used to buy Gunsmith Cats, I remember. And that comic was totally like kid friendly until it completely was the opposite. And so like you wouldn't expect these scenes and all of a sudden you'd be like, oh my goodness, and yeah, I was definitely reading the wrong things at that age.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, I imagine it's not like everybody that works at the shops can read everything. So it's like if the first couple issues seem semi-kid friendly and then it gets really dark side, it's like they don't know any better. That works to your advantage.
Oh, for sure. That's one of my favorite things about comic books. That's what I've said this before, but my goal when my kids get older is to, it'll be select comics. It's not like I'm going to put any Milo Manara stuff around, but like creepy and eerie stuff.
Oh, sure.
To put it on a shelf low enough for them to get to, but also like just high enough where they'd have to work a little bit to get to it, but then also be like, whatever you do not read these. They will scare you too much. So they can have that experience of sort of sneaking and reading it and then getting scared and not being able to tell anybody.
I love that you're like strategically planning the things your kids will sneak and grab. That's amazing. Like I
Yeah.
also love the idea that there's like a certain height level that they can't reach to, and it's like that's a way you strategically make sure that the kids can't get to anything. I think it's
Yeah.
funny. My friend who's a big comic reader, has been on the show a bunch. His kids, or specifically his son Dex, he'll like because he reads a lot of comics digitally. It's funny because like he's like, oh yeah, you can go on my iPad and read comics. And then he came by one day and his kid was like 5, and he was reading like Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And he was just like, "Oh no, you can't do this! No, no, no!" And I feel like the iPad's going to change things for parents to a certain degree.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the other day I put on Twitter, I said, "Can my 6-year-old read Invincible?" Because it was kind of a joke. I knew that it was very violent, and I've read a bunch of it, but I couldn't remember. I didn't. As soon as I asked it, and people started pointing out things that I forgot, I was like, "Oh, of course I can't let him read it." But then so we were in Disney World at the time, and Otley had given, because we had done a show together. Otley had given me a big Invincible compendium, and so I was thinking, "Oh, I wonder if he can read this." Well, so he couldn't. But then on the plane, I was reading it, and he looked over and he saw blood on this guy's fist, and he was like, "Is that blood?" And I said, "Yeah." And then he said, "Can I read that?" And I was like, "No, you can't. Sorry, it's too big for you," or whatever. And he was like, "When can I read it? How old do I have to be?" And I was like, "I don't know." And he goes, 10. And I was like, "Sure, fine, when you're 10." But he was like, I could feel him like looking over my shoulder, so I had to put it away.
That's awesome. I,
Yeah.
I actually just have been recently rereading Invincible because it was coming to an end this week, and
Mm-hmm.
the funny thing is like there's like a lot of times in the book where they're like reference to like this is a family friendly book, so we're gonna go away now, and then like
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh okay, because it's like a sexual moment, and then like the next page somebody's chest is literally punched through, and
Yeah.
there's a nice balance there.
Yeah, I enjoy that. I like the way the book kind of grew, because I started also from issue 1 again. I'm on like volume 6 or whatever, and yeah, it's very interesting how it goes from it pretty was fairly wholesome for
Hmm.
the first few volumes, and then all of a sudden everything goes haywire. But I love that about serialized books, when they can sort of, when you can grow with them.
Yeah. So going back to like the books your biggest influences when you're a kid, or your favorite artists growing up, do you think like when you were first reading comics, obviously you like Spider-Man, but I mean, did you
Hmm.
kind of know pretty quick that this Todd McFarlane guy was somebody different?
Yes, that's absolutely, yeah. That was the weird thing about it. That's why he had such an impact on me. It was like, that was I was so drawn to it that I won't tell the story again, because I'm fairly certain I told it on here before. But I got kind of hooked on McFarlane twice without realizing it was the same guy. Like,
I don't remember that.
well, I'll tell it real quick just in case. So my friend I lived in Pennsylvania from third to fifth grade. It was less than 2 years, um, and I had lived in Michigan my whole life, and none of my friends in Michigan were comic book readers, and I didn't really have any access to it. And then I went to Pennsylvania, and my friend had he was really into comics, so he had this one, and it was a Spider-Man issue. This is the Wolverine and the Wendigo issue,
Yeah.
Wendigo, however you say it. And I was like, oh my god, this one is And I studied it and studied it, and for some reason, when you're younger, you don't really. It doesn't occur to you that it's a specific person that you should try and find more by.
Right.
And so I just didn't have any idea of the name of the guy that did it. And then I moved back to Michigan, and then when I was like 14 or 15, I went to the store and I bought an issue. I looked through the books and I found an issue of Spawn, and I was like, oh my god! Like, after I'd looked through everything, this was the one that jumped out at me that I had to have. And then I became obsessed with McFarlane. And then I
Hmm.
was like, I want to go get. I would read his letters columns. I was like, he did Spider-Man. I should go get those issues. I went and grabbed those back issues, and I was like, oh, this is the same freaking guy. This is insane.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, so there's something, because I was a huge Disney fan. Like, it started with animation for me. That was my obsession when I was really young, and I think it was something about the combination of animation with this sort of like gritty textural finish that was like a marriage of things that were just perfect to me.
Hmm. Yeah, I do think it's funny when you're a kid. Like, there's like some things that stand out, but you don't really know why. And one of the first, like the very first trade paperback I ever got was of the. Did you ever read the X-Men crossover Extinction Agenda?
Who did that?
That was like the one with like Genosha. That was Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, and John Bogdanove.
I probably did, yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, I had that trade, and the funny thing is like I knew I loved Jim Lee, and like it was funny because like all three artists, it was like I was kind of defining my style just based off of that one trade. It was like they would alternate issues, and I was like, I can't wait to get back to Jim Lee. I like his stuff so much. It is ridiculous.
Exactly. Yes. Well, that's the funny thing about the McFarlane. Like ever since then, I feel like every other artist is at least somewhat acquired taste, where it takes me at least one issue or two issues to really be like, oh, I love this. I didn't realize I love, but that stuff hit me right off the bat. Like I'm a huge J. Scott Campbell fan and a huge Joe Madureira fan. And I remember reading Wizard and they were like number one and number two hottest artist or whatever. And so I went and got books from them and I was like, this isn't even close to that, Capullo and McFarlane. And then I, read a couple issues and I was like, this stuff's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to ask one really quick question. It's kind of like a middle like influence / like artist thing, but do you feel like a sneaky big influence for you was like just Wizard magazine in general?
Absolutely. I wish that there was something like that still. That was everything to me. I mean, that taught me everything about the comic book industry, about what I should be reading. Like I mean, it was like the Bible, of comic books. It was nuts. Like I would read that thing cover to cover, like where I'd read all the letters. I'd get so hyped about I like just thinking about it now. I get hit with waves of nostalgia thinking about the first time that when they put a preview for The Darkness in there, the Sylvester in that first image, and it was just like, oh my God, like I can't. How am I supposed to wait until this comes out? This is impossible.
It introduced me to so many different creators and so many different like books that I probably wouldn't have discovered otherwise. Just because, I mean, back then we didn't really have anything. But it is funny. Like I think people remember it for its negatives, and there are negatives involving Wizard. But at the same time, like I loved it. Like growing up, it was such like a big thing for me. Do you remember? Did you ever get the Dark Book, like the one where they ranked all the villains?
Oh, probably. I mean,
man.
It depends on when it came out because I mean, I have a complete run from the time I started, not from number one, but from the time I started till for like 6 years probably. I have every single one.
Do you still have them?
That's a good question. I have these bins of comics that I just go through every once in a while. Mm-hmm. I bet I have a bunch of them. I don't know if I have all of them because my parents did have a flood where we lost some stuff.
Oh man, yeah. I actually dug through mine. I went back to my parents' house because sadly that is like my depository for a lot of my comics. I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. Mm-hmm. And like I still have a lot of them, and it's fun looking back. It's like you're like time traveling into that era when you look at those issues.
Oh, it's complete nostalgia and like almost like a time machine where I'm like I can just remember. I feel like I'm back on my childhood bed, like laying on my stomach just reading all this junk.
All right, so the next thing I want to bring up is I was going to ask you your biggest influences, but I feel like I kind of can guess that based off of what we just talked about. But
yeah,
so let's go with something different. Like let's talk about 3 influences of yours that might surprise people. Like, and it doesn't just have to be comics; it can be animation, it can be right. I don't know, whatever.
Well, I mean, I said it already, so it might not be that surprising, but Disney animation was just massively influential to me. That's what I drew as a kid, like I would take out those, any Disney book that had any sort of animation stills or anything, and to copy those. Mm-hmm. There's a book, and it's sort of a how-to book. It's called it's just called Animation Now by Preston Blair. Mm-hmm. And he was a animator back in the day, and it's this book that I don't know how I ended up with it as a kid. But it's all about it's basically how to draw, but it's called animation. So it really could just be called how to draw anything.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that they show it is through drawing cartoon characters and stuff. And it's incredibly, I mean, I still use the things that I learned from it. And it was weird. That's another weird one that as an adult, John Crispolucci, actually, I'll say that's my third one, is Ren and Stimpy.
Wow.
That was massively influential on me. But he has this blog that's incredible called johnkstuff.blogspot.com or whatever. And the guy, he's a genius. He's not just a genius. He is also an animation historian. So he has all kinds of information on how to draw, how to do, such and such. But he said something about the Preston Blair book, and he put up a couple pages from it on one of his posts. And I saw it, and it was like, I don't even remember having this book, but I remembered those pages that he had put up, like, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I knew, I had them burned into my head. And then I was like, oh my God, I got to get that book. So I got it, and I know everything in that book.
Yeah.
So at some point as a kid, I mean, I'm talking, I probably could have been like 6 for all I know. I devoured that book, and it taught me so much about drawing that I don't know how else I would have learned it.
So, like, what style was that? Was it a style thing, or is it just like basically so informative of how to even approach art?
Right. It was so because it's how I learned to sketch. Because I think as a lot of kids, they want to draw things. They want to take a pen
mm-hmm.
and just start drawing it, and they don't understand the separation of the sketch versus the finish. And that's normal. But somehow this book taught me that separation, and I learned it so young that I think it kind of confounded a lot of people that I knew. Like, when people would see me draw as a kid, they're like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you drawing a bunch of circles? And then, like, why would you, like, just draw it?" And I was like, "No, this is how you do it. This is how you draw." And I still kind of maintain that, like, that way of learning teaches you how to be able to draw anything,
mm-hmm.
to draw anything well. And I think I just got an early jump start because I had this book that, somebody must have given me as a present or something.
The funny thing is like when I was a kid, I wanted to be an artist, and I would have sketchbooks just filled with stuff. But I remember looking at like the Bart Sears stuff and the Wizard, and where like they would be doing the circles and everything. And the funny thing is your exact thing that you're talking about there. Like, I couldn't delineate between sketches and finished. Like, I was like, I would do the circles and like have the line where like the nose would go and everything like that. And I was just like, how am I supposed to draw this without having that line there? Like, it was like my brain couldn't even understand that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to, because I try to teach my kids that too, and they don't. They're still resistant to it. So, hopefully they'll, I'm starting my own Kubert family. So they're going to be comic book artists too. So they better learn soon.
So Ren and Stimpy, huh?
Oh God, yeah. That show is still incredible.
I have to admit, I was always like at least 50% grossed out by that show, and I had a hard time with it because of that. I watched it, but it was kind of like Garbage Pail Kids for me, where I was like, I would look at those cards and I'm just like, I like this, but I also kind of hate it because it's so gross.
Well, I agree that it was gross, but that to me was awesome.
Yeah, that's like a feature for most people.
Yeah, I'll say more. Like people say, like, oh, Shrek, stuff like that. Kids watch it get one set of jokes, and adults get another set of jokes. With Ren and Stimpy, it is completely that way, only like for real. Like, there's no way that I understood it on the way that I understand it now.
Mm-hmm.
Because my kids will watch it, and we laugh at different parts.
Are they like, why are you laughing?
Yeah. Oh yeah, they really do. They're always like, what did I miss?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, Ren is super depressed, and they represent bipolar disorder, and you know, but I can't explain that to him, so I'm just like, it's because he farted.
It was a secret fart.
Yeah.
So it was like, in terms of like an influence, was it like an energy thing, or is it just kind of how you approach storytelling in general?
Definitely an energy to and life to the drawings that uh, I loved, and that was around the time when people started getting picture in picture on their TVs.
Oh yeah.
And a big thing for me and my friend and my sisters to do was to watch Ren and Stimpy, and we would freeze the we would pause the picture in picture while the show was on,
Mm-hmm.
and we would draw those,
Like,
paused frames.
oh wow.
And so yeah, I learned a lot about drawing from that. And then it's funny now reading his blog, where he kind of explains his thought process. It's influenced me now in a different way, where I see it through his lens a little more. And you just learn all these weird little ticks that he has with it, the way that he likes to draw things. Like, one of the things that you'll notice in that show that I didn't notice it. I mean, I would copy it, so I had to have noticed it, but I never thought about it. Is that like there's no such thing as symmetry on any of his characters. So like one eye
Oh.
is always way bigger than the other. One nostril is bigger than the other nostril. Uh, he does all these weird things that just give it such visual interest that that simple tiny thing can be applied to design or anything that you're doing in comic books.
That's yeah. I mean, I never noticed things like that. It's kind of like, because I only watched it when I was a kid, and so when I was watching, I was mostly watching it to laugh. It's interesting
Mm-hmm.
how you kind of notice things differently as you, obviously in the joke department, but also like the asymmetrical part of that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like reading about the way that he thinks about it has just added so much depth to it. I recommend getting the DVD collection. It's really fun to revisit, especially those first few seasons when he was heavily involved. After
Mm.
that, it kind of goes its own. It kind of loses the foundation of what it was, um, which was him.
So do you have like I imagine you have like a lot of like animation art books. Like I love, like, I have the art of the How to Train Your Dragon series, partially because I'm a huge
Yes.
fan of the How to Train Your Dragon movies, but
Hmm.
also just because I find those books to just be astounding. Like, is that a big thing for you?
Oh, yeah. Specifically, my favorite ones have been the DreamWorks. DreamWorks kind of has an A team and a B team
Mm-hmm.
for movies. Like, what was it, Mastermind, Megamind?
Megamind, yeah.
I would call that like a B team book where they don't quite have the same design uh, sense as the ones they really put the time into. But How to Train Your Dragon and Kung Fu Panda and those ones, they have this one designer. I think his name's Nico Marlet.
Oh my god, he's so incredible.
I know. Yeah, he's amazing, and he's like my favorite out of all of those guys, because every illustration that he puts in there is just so creative and interesting.
I think that Nico Marlet actually did the, like, it was either How to Train Your Dragon 1 or 2, where like the in the credits they had like the animation, like
Hmm.
showing some like the animation storyboards that they had, and like that's
Hmm.
kind of just like the initial credits thing. And I think it was like his stuff, and I just remember as soon as I saw that, I was like, I have to find out who this artist is because it's blowing my mind right now.
Yeah, he's one of a kind. I feel like those little like 2D things that they do in Kung Fu Panda, where they have like the 2D animation. It's almost like paper
Oh
cutouts.
yeah, yeah.
I feel like he has to be heavily involved in those. Those seem to have a lot of his aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. Totally. All right, so we're gonna take a huge twist. We're gonna move over to basketball for a second. This is the most important question I'm gonna ask you. Which five Pistons would you say most caused the Malice in the Palace? And you are allowed to say Ben Wallace 5 times.
Okay, well, Ron Artest was never a Piston.
Okay, okay.
Did you know that he tried to be a Piston towards the end?
Did he really? Like, as like a
Oh
make
yeah,
good or something?
yeah. He one off season. I think it was before he went to the Lakers. He initially reached out to the Pistons and uh, Dumars was just like, I don't think so.
This is kind of an awkward vibe, Ron. Or I guess he'd be meta at that point.
Yeah, I think it would have been fun, but I'm sure it would have been fine, and everybody would have forgiven him, and I think that everybody would have been fine with it at that point. But
maybe besides the guy he punched in the stance that didn't actually throw the drink at him.
Oh, I felt so bad. Can you imagine how scared that guy was?
Oh my God, I'd be horrified. I think
there's like a freight train running at you, and you're just like, what did I do?
I feel like he was also holding a drink, and I'm like, by process of elimination, Ron, you should have realized that this is not the man who threw a drink at you.
Well, because whoever his friend that was standing by him, he did have a drink, and he threw it in Ron's face as he ran at him. I've watched this video 1,000 times.
I remember I was the night it happened. I was flying back from college to from Seattle to Alaska, and I was in the Seattle airport, and I was walking by this bar, and I just saw what was happening. I was like, oh no. And I ended up staying up from like midnight until 5 a.m. just watching SportsCenter over and over, as like it was like the JFK assassination video, just hoping that one of these times will reveal a way that all these players are not going to be suspended for the rest of my life. And it did not happen. That was the best Pacers team of my lifetime, and it's like it was just destroyed. Understandably.
It was that night. I was at home with from college also, and I was watching it with my dad.
Ugh.
And it took. I feel like it took. Like, I don't even think I could have gone to sleep that night because I was just so like, oh my God, that was like your adrenaline goes crazy. You're like, what is happening?
Yeah.
My favorite story is when this Steven Jackson story where he said that Ron Artest walked into the locker room afterwards and said,
"Do you think it was going
to be we'll
trouble?
Be suspended?" Yeah, you do think we're gonna get in trouble?
Yeah. Did you read the Grantland oral history about it?
I think that is. Yeah, I read. Yeah, I did.
It's great. It's so good.
Yep.
It is funny though, because like there's so many interesting parts about that I can look at now. Is like so for listeners, I'm a Pacers fan. Ryan's a Pistons fan. Those two teams managed to get into a bit of a tiff, which led to the Pacers jumping into the stands and fighting the entire arena. But
essentially a full scale riot.
Yeah, I mean it was insane. It was like it was a scene from Invincible if that was he was a basketball player. But and but the amazing thing is you can break down so many of those moments into these like little segments, like the time when Jermaine O'Neal punches the guy that looks like Turtle from Entourage, and he slipped
on beer on the court, and if he wouldn't have slipped, I think that guy is like in a coma.
Right? Yeah, he was gonna punch the living hell out of him. I mean, Jermaine O'Neal was a big dude, but that was a hell of a thing. If Twitter existed back then, you would my account would have went so dark side against Ben Wallace. It would have been unbelievable.
One of my I have family in Indianapolis, so that caused quite the ruckus at the next family get together. Because they were all blaming the Pistons, and I was like, "What? Ron Artest?" But there was one of my favorite moments in that whole fight was when Ron Artest runs into the stands, and he starts hitting people and going, and Steven Jackson runs up there, and Bill Laimbeer calmly says on the telecast, he goes, "It's not pretty, but it happens." I was like, maybe in your head, Bill Laimbeer.
Man, if Bill Laimbeer was playing still, I feel like he kind of would have went up there and just started fighting Ron Artest, and that would have been insane.
Oh, for sure. Well, Ben Wallace, if you recall, also when he ran up there, Ben thought he was running to like fight him, so he started to run up there, and then he saw what was happening, and he just kind of like slowly backed away, like a Simpsons back away.
He thought he was doing like an end around on him.
I think he thought he was going to run around the back and come over, and they were going to. They were going to just like fight. And so he ran up there for just a second, took about 5 steps up there, and then was like, oh, geez.
Oh, I'm so glad I can laugh about this now as opposed to the horrific depression it caused me for several years. It gave us Troy Murphy and Mike Dunleavy. That was a dark time.
My goodness. Hey, fantasy all-star Troy Murphy with those rebounds.
Oh, yeah, that's true. He was so much better at fantasy than he was. He was like, oh, man, he makes threes and he can rebound. This is amazing. Everything else about him was just like, oh, my God, this is terrible. Yo, everybody. I want to take a quick break from the show to talk about my friends over at Super Context. Super Context is a weekly podcast autopsy of media, how we consume it, and how it informs our everyday culture. Each episode looks at research into the production and distribution of film, television, literature, music, or comics, even comics journalism in an episode I guested on, all while exploring how modern entertainment represents humanity and contributes to our collective identity. Fancy! Super Context is available on Apple Podcast, Overcast, Google Play, Stitcher, and other podcast platforms, as well as their landing page at supercontextpodcast.libsyn.com. And now, back to Off Panel. All right, so we're going to go back to comics. So we're going to go, it's kind of connected. We're going to do the LeBron James thing of doing personal Mount Rushmores, but this time it's going to be personal Mount Rushmore of comics. What is your four that would be on your list?
Okay, well, it depends. We're talking about artists, or are we talking about
comics.
Just anybody that worked in comics?
No. It just like actual comics, not the creators.
Oh, comics. Oh,
and
Amazing
that includes
Spider-Man.
That includes manga and everything too.
Okay, Amazing Spider-Man, no question.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just talking series, not single arcs.
You can do whatever you want.
Okay. It's difficult.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I've got to go with Akira, no question. Let's see. Look at my shelf.
And by the way, I can edit out stuff too.
Okay, well, I'll say a bunch of the porno ones that I love.
I meant for like spatial timing and everything.
Right. Pluto. That might be up there. And then I have to say, one of the longest books that I read, Uninterrupted Runs. Because normally, like even on Amazing Spider-Man, I would say I
step out from time to time.
I tend to dip in and dip out.
Yeah.
Uninterrupted Runs, I think the longest one I ever read was Spawn.
Yeah.
I read that up through 60 or something like that, so that gets a nod.
So like the early days of Spawn, or not even early, I guess like first few years.
Yep. Well, I mean, yeah, 1 through 60 at least. I got up to 60. I remember that. And I mean, I could say there's so many I could say. This is because Preacher's one of my favorites. Alan Moore's Swamp Thing is up there.
I've never read Alan Moore's Swamp Thing.
Dude,
I'm a monster.
It is. It's probably my favorite thing by him. I love Watchmen and and I just read V for Vendetta. That was really good. But I love his Swamp Thing. It's kind of fun to see him because he's sort of all these other things that he's done. If you think about it, he's kind of it's always like a derivative thing of so like the Watchmen was sort of used the Charlton characters. V for Vendetta is actually one of the more original things. But Swamp Thing was him sort of restrained because he had to be because he's using this thing that he didn't create. Mm-hmm. And it's like horror comic. It's super smart, and it's scary. Like it's legitimately a scary comic book, which is very difficult to do. So yeah, it's up there for me.
I on my newsletter that I was writing, I did this one issue that was like greatest what ifs in comic history, and one of them was like, what if Alan Moore and DC never broke up? Because like he did a lot of really interesting things with those characters. Like one of my favorite random stories from Alan Moore was when he did that Mogo Doesn't Socialize story. I don't know if you ever read that. It was like a Green Lantern story. It's amazing. It's about this bounty hunter who's trying to go and hunt this Green Lantern named Mogo. And it's actually told as like a flashback for like a story that's being told from one Green Lantern to another one. And do you know who Mogo is by chance?
No.
Mogo is actually the planet that is a Green Lantern. And so he's on this planet trying to find Mogo, and he's like, "Where are you? Show yourself!" And then he finally, when he's mapping it out, he realizes that the forest that he's in actually is a Green Lantern symbol, and that that basically the entire planet is Mogo, and there's no way he could ever beat him, and he runs away screaming. And and then at the end he's like, and that's why Mogo doesn't come to, or that's why Mogo doesn't socialize. Uh, and it's like, because this one guy's like, "Where's Mogo? Like, why doesn't he come to the meetings?" And I was like, "Because he's actually a planet, and he would screw up the gravity of the entire place." It's pretty amazing. But I always like the stuff he does because it seems like he's really. I mean, this is an understatement because it's Alan Moore, but I mean, he's incredible at like reinventing all these things and
Yeah.
taking something old and turning it into something new.
Yes. Yes. He is one of those guys that, yeah, he hasn't created as many new things as much as taken old ideas and turned them into he just finds the essence of them and makes them incredible.
Mm-hmm.
You need to read the first issue that he did called The Anatomy Lesson, and then I defy you to not devour the rest of it.
The sad thing is they're in my local library. I need to just go and borrow them. Um,
Yeah.
so do you think that like your Mount Rushmore is? I mean, naturally you're an artist and you probably have an artist leaning, but do you feel like your stuff is more like you lean towards those artists who really like got you going when you were younger and also today?
Um, yeah, I think it's almost impossible for me to really enjoy something that I don't, to fully embrace something if I don't love the art.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it's, I mean, I can't think of a specific book that people say is good that I don't like the art, but, and I wouldn't say it out loud if I did because I wouldn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But, yeah, that's definitely it. Whatever book I'm enjoying has to, like I said, I dip in and out of Spider-Man, and I would say that mostly that's because it depends on who's drawing it,
Mm-hmm.
and if it's got somebody that I just don't, that doesn't excite me, then I'll just, I'll catch up with you later, Peter.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the nice thing is it's just like if this one doesn't work for you, you can always come back for the next one.
Hmm.
So that ties in perfectly. Next question. So let's go with what your three favorite Spider-Man stories are.
Um, okay, now I'm going to say one, and it's going to make me seem like an egomaniac, but it really is. Superior Spider-Man was, I think, I think that Slott has had an obvious, like, legendary run on the character.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that uh, that was sort of the best part of his run on the character.
Yeah. So
For me.
really really quick, I just gotta say, like I did this big piece on Spider-Man for the Ringer, and when I was prepping for it, I read Slott's entire run, and I hadn't read Superior by that time, so all I had in my head was that like people were really mad about it, and then I
Yeah.
read it and I was like, this is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
It's like
Well,
absurdly good.
I think that the way that people reacted to it was they hated it until they read it and then they loved it.
Yeah.
So, it's still like, you know, at conventions, it's, even when I have a new book out, I still seem to get more questions about Superior Spider-Man than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Craven's Last Hunt is really awesome. I love Mike Zeck. He was at the top of his powers, I felt like, at that moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
And when Spider-Man went to Kansas and he fought the kangaroo, just kidding. um, I would say that I don't know if they even titled the arcs at the beginning, but I've been reading it from issue 1 to my son,
Mm-hmm.
and I really I just like the first 20 or so issues. It's really fun to read it with a child
Mm-hmm.
and see it, because I see it now in a different lens. Whereas when I was younger, I would always kind of stumble on it where it seemed like too simplistic, or Ditko hadn't quite grown into his amazing self yet.
Mm-hmm.
But now when I'm rereading it, I don't think of it as too simplistic. I think of it as like incredibly heartfelt.
Yeah.
And also, you can see the beginnings of Steve Ditko's thoughts on life. Like I hadn't ever really realized before that J. Jonah Jameson was like basically a character for Steve Ditko to write about how bad media is, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because you have to look at those books back then as like a lens, almost of the writer's perspective or the artist's perspective, because they would kind of plot it out and all that. And yeah, no, it's really a fun read, and I would put that obviously up there with any of them, because it's kind of like reading the beginning of Invincible, where you just everything's possible, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, it is. The only thing that kind of gets me with like the original Amazing Spider-Man stuff, because I was reading I read through a bunch of the old stuff for The Ringer too, and it's like there's like some walls of dialogue in there that I get like a little thrown off by. But I mean, it's a stylistic difference between now and then. That's really it.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely, well, everything had an exclamation point.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, yeah, and they were also talking a lot while they're fighting and telling you what they're doing while they're doing it,
Mm-hmm.
Lots of that stuff. But again, like, I think that just the level that how much my son enjoys it and how much he doesn't care about that stuff has made me. I guess maybe it's made me strip away all that stuff that kind of bugs me about it,
and getting overly analytical about it and everything.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
I'm just seeing it like a little kid, and it's really fun.
That is awesome. All right, so next I want to ask you about some of your rivals / peers from today. I want to ask you, what 4 artists would you, when you see their work, do you just want to instantly find a way to steal their powers from today?
James Herron, no
Yes.
question. Let's see. Trad Moore.
Mm-hmm.
I just was talking about this with one of my friends. I'm gonna look at my text messages because we were texting about it.
I'm gonna tell you a really quick story about James Herron really quick. So do you read Zach Lodahl?
Yeah, of course.
So like he used to, when he'd ever write about Larry Sanders back in the day when Larry Sanders was actually in the NBA, he would always I think it was Larry Sanders. He'd always write about Larry Sanders, and he would put it all in caps with exclamation points, because he was just so hyped about Larry Sanders. So for a long time, when I was writing for Multiversity, when this like Mignolaversity thing, back when James Herron was first coming around on the Mignolaverse, I would always write James Herron all caps exclamation point as like an homage to Zach Lowe, because James Herron, every time I see his stuff, it just blows me away. He's just like, there's something just viscerally insane about his work that just makes me feel like I could, I don't know, punch dance through a marathon right now or something.
Yeah, I think that if he's got the same, like if I was a 12-year-old right now and I saw his work, I would be like enamored and probably stalk him.
Mm-hmm.
as I would do back in the day. Daniel Johnson.
Oh yeah.
Daniel, he does Extremity. He's one of my close friends, so it kind of makes it maybe it actually makes it worse.
It's easier,
like more irritating for me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think I meant from stealing his powers standpoint. I'm like, I feel like it'd be easier to steal his powers convenience wise, but it'd be worse because you actually are friends with him.
Yeah, like it just drives me. Well, and he's so fast, and so like here I labor over these pages, and he'll start. He does it to annoy me. Where we'll be on Skype, and he'll be like, "Yeah, I'm starting my page right now." And I'm like, "You don't have to tell me that. I know why you're doing this." And then he'll be done, 3 hours later, and I'm like, "You jerk!" Like, so he's one. I really love what Jorge Jimenez is doing.
Oh my god,
DC.
Yeah, he's killer.
Yeah, and the handsomest man on the planet. Have you seen his Instagram?
Jorge Jimenez. Oh yeah, I do remember him being a bit of a looker.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where you're like, come on, like you got everything going for you, just cut it out.
I actually kind of want to ask you about Jorge Jimenez, because I'm pretty sure I saw you tweet something about how like his stuff can only really be accomplished with digital, and like I was curious, like why is that?
He's using all these. He's doing all these things that you couldn't. I mean, you could technically. on a page you could use washes or something to make your background fade out to gray. You could use an airbrush. You could actually physically get, Travis Charest used to do this, where he'd get out the airbrush and he would knock back things in the background with an actual airbrush. But in comics you have to produce things on a schedule, especially if you want to do books like Superman or so it's not really feasible to do all these techniques that it would take to accomplish the things that Jorge accomplishes probably in the average day, because all of the tools are just a button press away. Russell Dauterman is similar. He's using digital in a way that honestly I think it's the future, because you can now do all these textures and things that I guess it's hard to explain to anybody that hasn't used the textures, but basically the only way to achieve gray in the old way that we produce comics with an inker would be to make a bunch of little lines that gradually you do gradients and all that stuff with little lines that would take you way more time than a person has in the day. Whereas now you can, use a brush in or Clip Studio and, do that same thing in 30 seconds. So he's essentially, a lot of the way that he's working now is you're almost getting like a painted background with more depth than you would have been to achieve if you just penciled and inked it. And then there's something to be said, like Sean Murphy, he's able to achieve a lot of different textures and everything. But that can't be expected of everybody, because he's kind of he's just a master of inking. It's crazy. So, I think that we'll just start to see more and more people try this thing until it's just this. That's how comics are produced.
So are you, with like the brushes and everything, is that a big part of the why like somebody like Kyle T. Webster is like a hero to everybody in the art community?
Yes, yes, and the more that you play with those things, the more that you realize that like almost any technique that you could achieve traditionally, you can achieve digitally. Only now you don't have to like clean tools and like when I ink with a brush, I have to do all these things to make sure that the brush is working properly and clean it and make sure it's not splitting. And then you make a line and you're like, oh God, the head the bristles just split. And there's just none of that anymore. So it's it's incredible. Things you can do.
I had John Paul Leone on my podcast, and he was talking about this one cover he did for DMZ, and it was like basically him just kind of stacking all these elements on top of each other in the actual physical space, like doing everything traditionally. And it sounded like, obviously to me, a Philistine, it just sounded like an unbelievable amount of work. But it's like you think about it digitally, and it's like, you don't need to necessarily do that now. And
there's a certain danger to it where if everybody's using the same techniques,
right,
or also that if you're using it as a crutch,
right.
I've seen a lot of I've kind of seen it, is what I'm saying, in some young artists where they're leaning on it so much that it's hindering their growth. But I think that there's plenty of other examples of people that understand how to use it and have grown, well beyond whatever limits you would think it would put on them. So,
yeah, it's all about achieving a balance, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm not sure where I stand on if you should learn traditionally and then go to digital. I'm not I've kind of done both, so I only have one perspective. But I feel like if you asked Jorge Jimenez, he's probably just been digital from day one, and that's how he learned to do it. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I just looked at his Instagram. That dude is handsome as hell. My God. It's ridiculous.
yeah, look at that hair.
And he like works out. Where does he find to have time to work out? I mean, he's a working comic book artist. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know. And I mean, blow drying that hair, it's got to take, you know, I don't even know.
I need to get him on the podcast just so I can talk to him about his schedule, just to figure out where it all comes in.
The whole time you end up just talking to him about beauty tips.
So how do you do that? Is this a product thing, or is this like a treatment? What do you do? All right, next question. We're going off topic. I want you to rank the meals. This is important to me. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Rank them top to bottom.
Oh my God. Well, breakfast is the best.
Oh God, I thought I was gonna have to kick you off the podcast for a second. Thank God.
No, breakfast is by far my favorite. I love breakfast food. I would eat it for every meal if it wouldn't make my cholesterol go through the roof. Nothing better than just like eggs and bacon and toast in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Lunch sucks because normally what I do for lunch is I just don't want to feel bogged down. So, and I don't want to take a long time. So I just basically just eat the same thing every day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's either a salad or I'll just I will eat deli chicken breast that's like, you know, sliced, and I'll just put like a piece of cheese on it and I'll just roll it up and eat it.
That's amazing.
It's pretty gross. And dinner's really good. But I love going out to eat. Like that's probably my favorite thing in the world to do.
Yes.
And my wife's favorite thing too. So that makes dinner seem better, but honestly, breakfast is by far the best.
Totally.
So it goes breakfast, dinner, lunch.
I feel like lunch is also the least versatile. It's kind of like you just kind of do what you do with like breakfast and dinner, just less well.
Yeah, I feel like lunch only happens because it has to.
All right, so we're going to spin off breakfast. Like, you know, breakfast is firmly established as your favorite. So what are your the 4 favorite foods of said meal? And you can do individual items like bacon, or you can be like breakfast sandwich, breakfast burrito, stuff like that.
Okay. My very favorite, let's see, what was my very favorite breakfast I've ever had? Have you ever had like a Mexican breakfast where
Yes.
you get like the eggs and the beans and all that?
Yeah. Wait, does it come with tortillas or no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that's pretty amazing, but I'm not going to say that. You would have thought I was going to.
It was a total misdirection. My wife is from San Antonio, and we went to some places down there that are just like astounding. There's this place called Mendez Cafe that Shea Serrano actually told me to go to, and it was an incredible suggestion. Like, not only was it like the best like breakfast I've had in like forever, it was also like really insanely cheap. It was so good, and it was like huevos. It was like a huevos rancheros, and then I also got breakfast tacos. Breakfast tacos, super underrated.
Yeah, that's what. Well, I was in Laredo when I had like the traditional Mexican one, and it was awesome. There's this place around here called the Original Pancake House, and they make omelets that are like insane. They must put like 8 eggs in them, and they're real fluffy. I don't know how they do it, but that's my favorite breakfast that I can get I'll usually just get like sausage and pepper jack cheese in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's incredible. Oh, and it comes with pancakes, and their pancakes are the best things ever. So I love that. A great omelet. There's this other God, I have all the different breakfast places around here cornered.
No, yeah. My wife and I, like, our favorite thing to do is go out to eat. So, like, we have the same thing, except for Anchorage has kind of a depressing breakfast scene, which is a bummer.
Right. There's another restaurant here that's, it's like a huevos rancheros type thing, but it's like all, you know, fancy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty amazing. So that would be number 2. And then there's another place by here that has they have skillets, so it's like eggs on hash browns, like the cubed potatoes with like every meat known to man and cheese, and it's called the I think it's called the I forget what it's called, but it's a something skillet, and I get that all the time too, and feel real fat. I also love that when I go out to breakfast at places, how much coffee I'll drink coffee until I'm like practically floating.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't do that at home. Only when I'm out.
My line is like I always are you a Flash reader / watcher of the Flash?
No.
Okay. Well, so the Flash has the ability to vibrate, and like he can vibrate through stuff. And I always say that
Right.
like whenever I like go out to eat for breakfast, like I drink enough coffee where I effectively can vibrate through things just like the Flash.
Yeah.
I mean that's kind of the level I get to. I when people have the ability, that's I think my favorite part about going out to breakfast actually is the fact that there will always be somebody coming over to refill my cup of coffee endlessly.
Yeah. It's almost like they don't even say anything, because every once in a while I'll know I'm like I've had too much, and I'll be like, no, please, no,
You must stop.
enough. Yeah.
There's this place I go to where I'll go there. Actually, when I've been trying to lose weight lately, and what my reward if I lose weight is I'll go out and have breakfast for lunch when I'm out for work. And there's this really great breakfast place down in downtown Anchorage called Snow City Cafe. And I'll sit at their bar, and as soon as I sit down, like the waitress will almost invariably just immediately put a coffee in front of me because she knows what I'm going to do, and it's pretty fantastic.
Oh yeah, that's I'm in a losing weight mode too, so this is all making me very hungry. But I really want to go get breakfast now.
I know, me too. I'm going to eat after this. But what is there a fourth one? What's your fourth one, or is it just blanket coffee?
Oh no, I mean I'll do this a lot. Like I just love French toast.
Yeah.
I mean I like French toast better than pancakes in general. So I make French toast for the kids every Saturday, and it's like a big family event. So it also has sentimental value. So it gets in there at number 4.
That's a good pick. That's a good pick. I can't disagree with any of them, but I have to admit, I'm more of like a breakfast sandwich / breakfast burrito guy. I don't know why that is, but it's just like I like a compiled meal in such a way.
Yeah, well, I will say there was a period in my life when I was in college where I was never awake in time for McDonald's breakfast.
Oh God!
But any time I was up before 10, it was like I'm getting McDonald's breakfast, and I do love a good sausage McMuffin with egg.
Yes, that. Oh my God, we're so simpatico. That is like totally my pick too. I mean, it's the only sensible pick. It's the best.
Yeah, you know what's sad is when you feel like I can't get the sausage this time. I got to lose some weight, and then you get the regular egg McMuffin. You're like, God, this would be so much better with the sausage.
Oh God, I've felt that emotion once, and then I never did it to myself again.
Yeah.
All right. So just a couple more. Let's do. This was gonna be really hard because it's your own personal favorite. I already know what one's gonna be, but favorite comics you've worked on. Let's go with your 4 favorite comics you've worked on. It seems like
I can't even
Superior's
believe
got
that
to
I've
be
worked on that many. Yeah, Superior's definitely up there, no question.
Yeah.
Right now I'm doing a book that I can't talk about, but I love the script so much that I have to say this unnamed secret project that I think will be announced next week, so they won't have to wait that long to find out what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But the writer on it's been, I mean, it might be the best script I've worked on.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm super excited about that. What else did I like? Oh, I hated everything else I've done.
Nailed it.
No question, Scarlet Spider. I mean, that was so much fun, and so just such an interesting time in my career, and there's so many people that still love it that I still I did all the covers for the series up to like 26 issues or something.
Mm-hmm.
And every convention I go to, I inevitably get the 26 issue run to sign.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're kind of like, oh, really? But then at the same time, you're like, this is amazing that,
Yeah.
this person has this. And so, yeah, that one is really amazing for me. And
Wait, really quick. I feel like doing like cover runs like that is like a super cool feather in your cap if you're an artist.
it is. It's really neat when you actually get to do that for that many issues. I can't believe I did that, honestly, in retrospect. I'm doing the covers for Renew Your Vows, even, since I've left the book. And there's been a couple times where I just haven't been able to do them. So I'm like, I'm sorry, you got to get somebody else to do it. So the fact that I was able to keep that up is pretty cool for me. And then let's see. I think Inhuman was pretty fun because that's where Charles Soule and I worked together for the first time, and he and I have become really close friends. And we had a lot of fun. We got to create a bunch of characters, and we're getting to see them used in other media now.
That's cool.
So yeah, that's super cool. And that's probably a tie with Renew Your Vows because I've really enjoyed that as well. And it was fun to come back to Spider-Man after, taking a hiatus.
Was it kind of cool to be able to, because you wrote some of those issues, right?
Oh yeah.
Was it nice being able to stretch your legs in that way?
It was terrifying, but also definitely nice to get that opportunity. And I don't think I would say at the very least I didn't fumble, you know. I think I hopefully, gained a few yards and using football analogies. But
well, the good thing is like, your entire life was like basically research for that project. So it's like, I feel like
exactly.
You get it for sure.
Yeah. And I've, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer more than I wanted to be an artist. So that was something that I aimed for a long time, and then switched to drawing. And, it's definitely something I want to do more of. Wouldn't it be funny if after I said that it might be the best script I've ever worked on, it turned out that I was writing my next project? I really love the writer. He's been great.
We'll just see if the writer announces it next week. I mean, I don't even know. I can't wait to read this. This is going to be incredible. Oh, my God. All right, so we're going to close with a lightning round where we're going to just do some quick one-offs. There's some stuff I just want to ask you about. There's like some random stuff. One of the things, I was going through your Twitter. A lot of this stuff comes from your Twitter. Why does Cena Grace think you're a Muppet? Or why does he draw you as a Muppet at least?
Oh, I don't know. I've got a giant head.
It was just funny because it was very specifically you as a Muppet in like this cartoon, this comic that is just incredible. Sorry, go ahead.
If you catch me on the right day, because I'm not a normal person in the way that I take care of my appearance, where basically I'll go months, or not months, but like, weeks without shaving, without doing anything with my hair, because I'm just like I just live in my basement. And so if you catch me at the right time when I haven't taken care of that yet, I can look pretty outrageous. Just recently I had a beard that I would walk upstairs and I would puff it out.
Yeah.
And it would drive my wife crazy because she just hates my beard. And that was just from sheer laziness, So I think that it can get pretty comical looking.
That's awesome. So is it like at least a full out beard? Because I've only grown a beard once in my life, and there's a reason for why it was once. It was very patchy. It wasn't great.
Oh no, mine grows in nice. It just, my wife does not have any affection for it whatsoever. She would prefer that to never happen, but what can I do?
Yeah. All right. So next question.
What, shave every day? Get out of here.
I actually really like shaving, which is really weird. I don't know why. I probably shouldn't have admitted.
Yeah,
I'm a monster.
If I had a real job and I had to go like out of the house, I would probably, take care of it. But
sure,
whatever.
All right. So next question: what has brought you more fame or infamy in one of their cases? Spider-Man Colorgate or your Ready Player One tweet? Your Ready Player One tweet is amazing. I
Holy
didn't
moly!
even notice that.
Yeah, that was just I just tweeted. I was at my nephew's birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese, and I just like checked Twitter while I was there because the kids are running around doing whatever. I tweeted it, and then I saw it, and I tweeted it, and then I left later. Like I didn't look again, and then I noticed that like Nico Case had retweeted it. I was like, "What is happening?" And it had 800 retweets. I don't know. I think that the Spider-Man Colorgate was. Did I end up calling it that on Twitter?
I think you did eventually, or somebody did. I don't remember. Like, I actually, yeah, you did. I think you said like, sorry for all the people who have like muted me during this hashtag Spider-Man Colorgate.
Yeah, it was. Well, that was so. I only put up the high res because every time I put up a commission, inevitably one person says, Can I have the high res? I'd love to color that."
Mm-hmm.
And it's always cool to see people do that. So I thought, well, this will just get out ahead of it, and then I don't have to later. I just scanned it and I was like, here. And then, yeah, it went crazy. And so I thought, oh, well, I'll retweet these 5 people that colored it. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got to the point where it was like, however, I don't even know how many did it. And every time I was hitting that retweet button, I was like, I'm sorry, guys, but I can't. First of all, this is really cool, and
Yeah.
I'm so happy that they're doing it. And, I'm sorry that you have to see this a million times, but I'm going to retweet all of these individually.
It was really cool, but I have to admit, when I was like trying to go through your Twitter for like questions that I could throw out there to throw you off, I was like, man, I'm scrolling through so many damn pictures of Spider-Man.
I know, yeah. I mean, I think people had fun with it, and I'm sure there was about 8 people that were like, screw this guy, I can't follow him anymore. Yeah.
That's okay. You can survive
Yeah.
without a few followers. Although I'm going to give the win to Ready Player One because Nico Case retweeted you.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I told my sister, and my sister's like the biggest Nico Case fan, and she's like, "What? How? What?" And, then when I showed her what it was about, she was just like totally unimpressed.
It was a really long leg, though.
Yeah.
All right, so the last 2 questions are patron questions. So first one, actually, they're both from somebody I'm pretty sure who was definitely assassinating you during the Comic Gate. Favorite ongoings from each publisher? Like, what are your current favorite ones are from, let's say, Marvel, DC, Image, and then everyone else in one bucket because you don't want to answer this for like 50 publishers.
Oh, that's tough.
And you also, and you can't include your own work.
Oh, what? I am Jason Aaron Stan.
Yes.
So his Mighty Thor run is, not just Mighty. There's Thor in general. From the time
God
that
of Thunder.
Esad was doing it, yeah, that's been incredible. So that gets the nod for Marvel. For DC, I'm trying to think if I'm always out of the loop. Like I always do this thing where, like tonight, I was reading Paul Jenkins and Jay Lee Inhumans for whatever
so
reason.
Good.
It's amazing. That's one of my favorite things ever. But
me too.
Yeah, I feel like people don't talk about it enough. So for DC, I do tend to read the Batman stuff in general.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been a big DC reader, even like other than Batman.
Mm-hmm.
I've always read Batman, but so we'll just say Batman because I do love Tom King. For Image, we will say I love Deadly Class. I think that might be the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go with Deadly Class.
I feel like Wes Craig might be my like not that I'm constantly ranking things. Actually, I'm obviously constantly ranking things, but I think Wes Craig might be my favorite working artist, right? Like line artist. He's so good. Like his
He
stuff,
really is, yeah.
like his like the energy on his like in his storytelling is just amazing. And I don't know, all of his characters have so much personality too. I just really love his stuff.
Well, he's so creative with the way that he tells the story that I'm just constantly shocked when he's not nominated for Eisners every year.
Yeah.
Not just not nominated, like he should be winning them.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
I completely agree. Every time that he hasn't been nominated, which has been every time he's been doing Deadly Class, I'm just kind of astounded because it is just like I don't know. I mean, Rick's awesome, but I mean, for me, he really makes that book, and it's just weird. But
he's pushing boundaries. I think that I don't like it when the awards are given to things that I feel like, well, it's not like that was groundbreak. Like I always feel like an award should go to somebody who's really
pushing stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like he's doing something that nobody else is doing at the moment. So,
and then everything else, like from everybody else, what would you pick?
That's not
not Marvel, DC, or Image. Yep.
Oh.
You don't have to do this if you don't want.
I'm not sure I can think. Like, give me some examples.
You mean from like the publishers? I mean like the graphic novel publishers like Nobrow or like First Second, Boom, Valiant, Dynamite.
Yeah, I don't know how much I've read. If I've read enough of anything.
You're a busy man. So let's close with one final Pistons question because apparently you have a sassy follower. Bobby Angus asked this.
Yeah.
What bar will you be drinking your sorrow away at when the Pistons finish 9th in the Eastern Conference and don't make the playoffs?
I won't be drinking at a bar. I will be outside of Stan Van Gundy's house with a pitchfork and a torch.
Just yelling, run plays for Stanley Johnson.
Just run, yes. Just do anything creative that isn't your standard thing that you've done since you entered the league. Because I think he's X's and O's. He's a really good coach, but he has zero ability to see beyond his system. Essentially, there's no creativity there, and it's grating on me because I do think he's a good coach, but he's not maximizing what he has. I can go on about this all day. Let's start another podcast right now about the Pistons.
I do feel like he has a tendency of just being like, okay, this worked for the Orlando Magic. We're just going to do Andre Drummond in 4 shooters. Like, we don't have 4 shooters. We're doing 4 shooters.
Yeah, he did that up until this year. Then they changed it to a more modern offense. And anytime that things get tough, he just reverts to that, pick and roll. And don't use the rookies. Don't use the young guys. If they make one turnover, pull them out of the game and teach them a lesson. It's just, ugh.
Yeah.
I've been having mini strokes for a couple weeks now when I'm watching the games.
I do have to admit, I do enjoy Blake and Andre. Actually seem like they enjoy each other, and they seem like they jive well. Like you don't normally see a lot of 4 or 5 pick and rolls, and it works pretty well.
I want to see it on every play. I would love that. I love when Blake is up at the top of the key with the ball. I think that's the underrated part of his game.
I don't understand why you don't basically make him your point guard while Reggie's out.
I was just, I think I'm mostly on Twitter just to talk to Pistons Twitter.
Yeah.
And I was just making that point the other day, and one of the guys that does, he's always posting numbers. He went and checked if my theory had any basis that Blake should kind of run point and that we didn't even need Ish Smith out there. And he kind of found with numbers that it probably was a good idea. So,
yeah. I always like reaching out to the people who are just constantly like blogging about this stuff. There's this one person who does it for the Pacers that I'm always just like throwing out random theories, and she's like, "Oh yeah, that is correct. I wrote about this." I'm like, "Oh my god, finally validation for my random thoughts I have while watching basketball."
Yeah, every once in a while I'll put one out there, and I'm like, "Uh-oh, I'm an idiot."
Yeah.
You know?
Did I make a
But then they'll
mistake?
reply positively, and I'm happy.
Yeah, there's like for some reason, the Pacers never let Miles Turner shoot when it's the fourth quarter, and it's just
Right.
like I don't know why. It's just like they completely forget it exists, and I'm like, he's a 6'11" person who shoots 3-pointers at 37%. That is a positive thing, and
Well, hey, you don't have Luke Kennard shoots like 43% from three,
yeah,
and they just will not run a play to get him open threes.
he also shoots really fast, which is
I
not
know,
common.
right? He could. I feel like he and Stanley Johnson are the ones that I'm most driven nuts by. In that, it's like Stan Van Gundy is like, okay, go out there and prove yourself, and then he's like, stand in the corner. And then if you can figure it out from there, then I'll let you play more. And it's like, that's not how this works.
Yeah, I do
Put
have
the ball
to,
in their hands and figure it out.
I do have to give you credit. I sassed you earlier in the season for Stan Van Gundy's drafting record, and I specifically mentioned Stanley Johnson going 0 for 13 in the season opener. And he's actually, I was watching him recently. He looks good.
He's had a few weeks here where he's kind of, since Blake got there, I think Blake has kind of empowered him by saying, okay, well, we're not going to do that thing where Stan just makes you stand in the corner. I'm going to give you the ball up here, because he kind of has, I think Blake has that power more than, most players do, to kind of not necessarily just do everything that Stan says. So no, he's been really good lately.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But we didn't draft Donovan Mitchell, and that's going to haunt me to my grave.
Wait, who did you draft instead? Oh, you drafted Luke
Kennard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who I think Kennard will be, his ceiling is, 16 to 20 points.
Yeah.
It'll be fine. I'll be happy with that, but not as happy as I'd be if I had, a rookie superstar.
Yeah, Don Mitchell is so fun. I have him on my fantasy team, and it's like every time I look at his stats, I'm just like, how do you keep getting better? Like, isn't there a rookie wall at some point? You're supposed to, like, get worse. This is weird.
Well, I kept saying things like, well, he came out in the summer league and he started destroying everybody right away. And I was like, okay, well, he's not going to do that in the season because he's only 6'3". And then he comes into the season and he keeps doing it. And then you find out that his wingspan is like 7 feet. And then you see him dunk a few times. You're like, he could be 5'2". It doesn't matter. He's so athletic and so long and he's just, ugh.
Actually, that leads me to my real last question. We're recording this right before All-Star Weekend. Pick the dunk contest winner: Dennis Smith, Donovan Mitchell, Victor Oladipo, Larry Nance Jr.
I've seen some pretty good Oladipo dunks, but it's going to be Donovan. Because first of all, well, how tall is Oladipo? 6'4"?
He's 6'4", yeah. Dennis Smith is really good. Don't sleep on that guy.
Yeah, I always like the guys that are not as tall, that look like they jump higher to complete the dunk. There's always one guy in the dunk contest that looks like he's doing a different thing. Mm-hmm. Where one guy, everybody else is like doing sort of powerful dunks, and then one guy looks like he's floating. Mm-hmm. And I have a feeling that's going to be Mitchell. And it's just they're going to twist the knife,
Exactly.
He's going to be perfect forever, and he's going to be the next Michael Jordan. And
they're
I'm going to kill myself.
They're going to dunk on an effigy of Ryan Stegman that's in the basket.
Oh my God!
Oh,
I'm so sad.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I made you sad. That was not how I wanted to go with this podcast. But Ryan, thank you for coming on for this adventure in podcasting with me.
Yeah, no problem. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with artist Ryan Stegman. You can find him on Twitter at Ryan Stegman and in the upcoming Venom series with Donnie Cates at Marvel Comics. If you're a fan of the show, this is some big news. Off Panel now has a Patreon. If you like the show and want to support it, consider backing on Patreon at patreon.com/offpanel. There are fun rewards and insider information you can get if you do. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Dan Guarino, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Evan Blazer, Brian McCrae, Ira James Udaskin, Benjamin Birdie, Henning Allers, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bruno Batista, Abraham Reisman, Adrian Diaz, Bobby Angus, Bjorn Basin, Darren Neely, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Michael Perlman, Phil Nall, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Schipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Maxwell Schmidt, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Lou Iovino, Christopher Carter, Nicholas Keslick, Greg Rucka, Ryan Mail, Adam Highfield, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris Morris, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Avnet, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim DiMonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook at /sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow on Twitter at @sketchcomic or follow me at @slicefriedgold. Want more from Off Panel? Subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and give the show a rating and review while you're at it. A quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track Outro from the album Volmilch opens and closes the show now. Give them a listen as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening and tune in later this week for another episode.